So I know some of you think, Colin, you media people are blowing this out of proportion. Folks, say it out loud. Famous young athlete, dad's a superstar. Many fans think his career is being sabotaged by the general manager and head coach. He plummets in the draft, laughs about it, and oh, by the way, multiple speeding tickets in camp. Is that not interesting? TMZ was built on guys like Shadur. It's fascinating. It's a soap opera. Now, I don't think he's going to be great against the Raiders. Why? Because I don't think he's great. But we all love tension, and you have real tension here. There's a lot of people that absolutely believe that the Cleveland Browns are mismanaging and undercoaching him and are rooting against him actively. I don't. Let's see who's right. So, and I've said this before, not every game has to be the Super Bowl or Ohio State, Michigan, or a Dodger-Yankee World Series, or, Duke, Carolina. I grew up on Evel Knievel, and I've always loved watching the Little League World Series. And this has a Jake Paul fight, reality television show. I'll be Andy Cohen between Max Crosby and the Raiders and Shedeur Sanders and the Cleveland Browns. And I can't wait. I mean, Tim Tebow games were ugly. They were kind of interesting. They got massive ratings for different reasons. So I don't think he's going to be great, but you can't tell me it's not interesting. 2-8 versus 2-8. NFL's king for this reason. I would be shocked if this doesn't get it's a spectacle, if it doesn't get a real number. And, again, not every game that is fascinating because the teams are great. We're watching the Buffalo Bills fall apart. That is fascinating. Last night, with that game, my show today, if Buffalo won by 20, it's not an interesting game. The fact Buffalo lost is interesting.
He's absolutely correct on that point. It's funny, I was actually contemplating that very concept today in relation to the Buffalo Bills, particularly after I created a video discussing the Kansas City Chiefs and their recent slump. I was having a conversation with a longtime subscriber of the channel, a massive Chiefs supporter, and he mentioned, hopefully you'll put together a post-game analysis video. This was in the context of the upcoming Jaguars versus Chiefs game, which was before Kansas City's performance really started to noticeably deteriorate. I told him, honestly, if the Chiefs win, and at the time, I believed the Jaguars were going to lose, it would feel like the same old story. I didn't consider the Jaguars to be a particularly formidable opponent, so a victory would just be, they beat a subpar team. It was scheduled for a primetime slot, and with a busy schedule, I figured I'd just address it the following day. But then they lost, and suddenly there was a compelling narrative, especially given the bizarre and dramatic way that game unfolded. That is a story worth diving into immediately. And that exact same principle applies to Shedeur Sanders. Of course, it's box office. Of course, it drives ratings. It's pure, unadulterated drama. This is the fundamental mechanism through which sports narratives and larger-than-life personalities are constructed. There's no other word for it. It's drama. And that inherent drama is what makes the entire spectacle so compelling and entertaining. You have one faction of the audience that is wholeheartedly, passionately cheering for Shadour's success, and you have an equally vocal and passionate contingent that is actively rooting for him to fail. My primary frustration with these discussions consistently revolves around a few key pretenses that people adopt. The first is the insistence that something is happening, which simply is not, such as the notion of organizational sabotage that was just alluded to. As I've previously stated, that line of thinking is, to me, completely irrational. The second layer of this problematic narrative is the pretense that there is somehow an extraordinary, unique level of animosity directed specifically at a player like Shedeur. The suggestion is that there are more people, or more vitriolic people, rooting against him than other players. But let's be perfectly clear, people are constantly rooting against Josh Allen. People are actively rooting against Lamar Jackson. People are rooting against Baker Mayfield. The intensity reaches a fever pitch. I've been observing this dynamic closely over the past several days. Every single time Josh Allen suffers a loss or has a subpar performance, the comment sections are flooded by Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes supporters to a degree that is truly staggering. The volume and fervor are through the roof. It's genuinely jarring to witness. Interestingly, When Lamar Jackson loses, you don't see the same retaliatory influx from Josh Allen's fan base. It just doesn't happen to the same scale. In my own experience, particularly earlier in the season when Baker Mayfield was enjoying a bit more success, this phenomenon became very personal. While the criticism of Josh Allen was more generalized, the commentary around Baker often felt directed at me, with people assuming I disliked him or favored Jalen Hurts. Consequently, whenever Jalen Hurts struggled, they would descend upon my comment section with a chorus of, "Yeah, what do you have to say about that? Explain this." If Baker won, it was a celebratory taunt. Yet, when Baker lost, the Jalen Hurts supporters weren't mounting a similar counteroffensive in the comments. The reality is that certain teams, certain players, and certain personalities naturally attract this intense, polarized energy. Shadur Sanders is now a card-carrying member of that exclusive club. He is part of the Baker Mayfield family of polarizing figures. He is part of the Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen family. That is simply the reality of his current standing. It has nothing to do with any additional, more insidious reasons why we might inject drama into a situation. The drama stems from the fact that he is an outspoken individual. He has a track record of significant success, yet he faces immense doubt. He has a father who is incredibly vocal and a prominent figure in his own right. There's an element of controversy there. He fell in the draft, which spawned a multitude of conspiracy theories. There is just a lot of narrative fodder surrounding him. There is a lot happening. And it's entertainment. I believe we can simply accept it as that and enjoy the entertainment value without needing to attribute anything more sinister to it. A fundamental part of sports fandom is the act of rooting for other teams and other players to fail. That is an intrinsic part of the ecosystem. And Shadur currently exists squarely in the crosshairs of that dynamic. Consider Caleb Williams. I cannot even quantify the number of people who were actively hoping for that man to fail. And Bo Nix, it genuinely felt like every single rookie quarterback last year was subjected to this. There was an absolute avalanche of individuals who desperately wanted those young quarterbacks to be complete busts. Jayden Daniels, I would argue, had the most positively received fan base, relatively speaking. Obviously, each team's fans support their own guy, but there seemed to be a broader general consensus around Daniels. His most vocal detractors were primarily Caleb Williams fans, driven by that natural rivalry between the first and second overall picks. You also had a few Eagles fans who might have downplayed him as a divisional rival, but nothing too extreme or dramatic. The intensity, however, was reserved for others. There was a relentless, intense drumbeat of, Caleb is bad, Caleb is failing, Caleb is a bust, and the same narrative was applied to Bo Nix. Nix is not good, he's trash, he's terrible. A significant portion of this criticism originated from Kansas City and Patrick Mahomes supporters, among others. This is the environment that amplifies everything to such an extreme. So yes, I absolutely want to watch this game. Are you kidding me? This is premium, must-see content. This is fascinating. This is pure entertainment. The central question is, how will Shedeur Sanders perform? And the stage has been set for him perfectly. This isn't to say that success is guaranteed or that failure would be definitive proof he isn't good enough, but he is facing the Las Vegas Raiders. That is arguably the most favorable possible debut matchup a rookie in his situation could ask for. Consider the challenges his peers faced. Jackson Dart had to make his first start against the Los Angeles Chargers, which is a much tougher assignment. Bo Nix had to navigate a brutal opening stretch against a gauntlet of elite defenses. Jayden Daniels was thrown into the fire against a Todd Bowles-led Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense. Those were difficult situations. Caleb Williams got to face the Tennessee Titans, who had a decent defense but were certainly a more manageable opponent, especially with an offense led by Will Levis. On the spectrum of easiest to hardest debut scenarios, Shedeur's matchup with the Raiders is firmly on the easier end. Again, this doesn't guarantee success, but it sets up a very specific context for the ensuing conversation. I'm already trying to anticipate the fallout because Monday's discourse is going to be utterly fascinating, regardless of the outcome. It was genuinely impressive to see Jackson Dart step into his role and find immediate success. That was a remarkable performance. By the same token, I defended Caleb Williams and Bo Nix during their early season struggles, though that was primarily in week 1, before they had a full body of work. Jackson Dart played a few games. I believe it was 3 or 4. So he had a brief period to acclimate. but it was still impressive to see him look so comfortable and effective right away. Conversely, if he had been overwhelmed and struggled, you could reasonably say, I understand, that makes sense. It's a tough spot. We've seen veterans like Joe Flacco look ineffective with one team, like the Cleveland Browns, and then immediately find success upon joining another, like the Cincinnati Bengals. Therefore, even if Shedeur struggles in this game, you cannot necessarily use this single data point to declare, aha, I told you he's terrible. However, if he does struggle, it does begin to slowly erode the narrative that he is an all-time generational talent. Many of his most ardent supporters are portraying him as a uniquely gifted, once-in-a-generation player. Well, if that were the case, you would expect to see at least some glimpses of that transcendent ability in this game, irrespective of the coaching staff or the surrounding roster. Furthermore, he now has a direct comparator in Dillon Gabriel. If he doesn't look at least as competent as Gabriel, the narrative becomes much harder to sell. It's also interesting to consider the counter-arguments that will inevitably emerge. If Shedeur succeeds, his detractors will immediately dismiss it with, well, it was only against the Raiders. I have always been consistent in my evaluation of young quarterbacks. I do not care how bad the opposing defense is. I do not care how inferior the team is. If you, as a young rookie quarterback, go out there and look comfortable, confident, make good throws, and demonstrate sound decision-making, that is impressive to me. That is a positive step. As the season progresses, a player eventually graduates from getting credit for beating bad teams. Perhaps that doesn't happen until the following year. For instance, I would argue that Drake May has already reached that point for me. I no longer place much stock in what he does against inferior opponents, just as I don't base my evaluation of Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, or Lamar Jackson on their performances against bad teams. When Patrick Mahomes lit up the Raiders' defense, my reaction was, I don't care. It's the Raiders. They're terrible. When they dominated the Commanders, it was, congratulations, they're terrible. It means nothing. But it would mean something if Shedeur does it. If Caleb Williams or Jaden Daniels had done it in their rookie years, it would have meant something. It signifies a baseline level of competence and poise that we have definitely seen some established players fail to demonstrate, especially early in their careers. So, everything is on the table right now. My goal isn't to make bold predictions. Other analysts are out there crafting very specific, prescriptive narratives. I'm simply trying to lay out what we are about to witness and what the potential narrative trajectories are. What I am most interested in is twofold. First, how does Shedeur actually play? What does the film show? What are my own independent conclusions based solely on what I observe? Second, I am utterly fascinated to see the public conversation that erupts, whether he plays exceptionally well or terribly. What will the talking points be? I strongly believe the discourse will be almost entirely momentum-driven. If he plays well, the hype will be amplified to its absolute maximum. If he plays poorly, the criticism will be equally amplified to its maximum. I see very little room for nuanced discussion here, just as there was little nuance in the conversations about Caleb Williams, Bo Nix, or J.J. McCarthy. I don't foresee any nuanced, measured conversation emerging about Shedeur Sanders. In a strange way, that's part of what makes it exciting. You know the conversation is going to be intense and absolute. It seems impossible that someone could simply say, you know, he actually looked pretty decent. It wasn't a perfect start, but there were some promising flashes, though it wasn't spectacular. Even if he posts a stat line like 17 for 28 for 210 yards, with 1 touchdown and 1 interception, a perfectly average, not bad, not great performance, where he took a few bad sacks and could have thrown another pick or two, the reaction will still be intensely polarized in one direction or the other. That is precisely why I want to form my own conclusions, sit back, observe what everyone else is saying, and then attempt to navigate that chaotic conversation from a grounded perspective. It's going to be a major story regardless of the outcome, and I am fully here for it. To echo the sentiment that was expressed, this is what makes football so incredibly captivating. I can say this with absolute, unequivocal certainty. If you gave me the choice between watching Shedeur Sanders' first start for the Cleveland Browns against the Raiders or watching a marquee NBA matchup like Stephen Curry versus LeBron James on Christmas Day, I am taking this football game every single time. Every single time. A regular season NBA game in November or December, even between the biggest stars, holds very little meaning for me. A rematch between Oklahoma City and Indiana? I don't care. The Lakers versus the Warriors, Luka Doncic versus Steph Curry in the 12th game of the season. It doesn't move the needle. But this game, between the Raiders and the Browns, two teams that are largely struggling, with a quarterback in Jimmy Garoppolo, who has been playing poorly, and a rookie in Shedeur Sanders, who has barely taken a snap in the NFL, has my undivided attention. Bring it on. Let's go. That is why football is king. That is why the NFL is unbelievable. I am significantly more excited about this game than other, ostensibly more competitive matchups. For example, the Carolina Panthers are playing the San Francisco 49ers. That game has real, tangible repercussions. The Panthers are genuinely competing for their division, as are the 49ers. They are, at the very least, jockeying for playoff positioning and potentially fighting each other for a spot. There are real stakes, and I want to watch that game. I will watch it, and I will be excited to analyze it. But this Browns-Raiders game, it's like, whoa, what is about to happen here? If the 49ers lose to the Panthers, I'll discuss it. We'll break it down. It will be a topic of conversation. But this game, this is an event. It's a, whoa, what do we have here moment. And I absolutely love it. I am completely here for it. Those are my comprehensive thoughts on the matter. I would absolutely love to hear yours. What is your perspective on Shedeur Sanders and the Cleveland Browns? Do you believe he will live up to the monumental hype surrounding his debut? Let me know your opinions in the comments section below. I read every single comment, so whether you find yourself in agreement with me or you think I'm completely off base, let me know. We can get into some lively discussions. We can engage in some spirited debates, but ultimately, let's remember to have some fun with it all. Please do consider subscribing. We are building an amazing community here, and I would absolutely love to have you as a part of it. I want to build something that we all feel genuinely connected to, something we're truly excited and proud to be involved in. I believe we are well on our way to achieving that. Please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, as it genuinely helps with the visibility and the platform's algorithm. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you all next time.